A college student is checking his muskrat traps in a wooded area of northeast Philadelphia on a cold February afternoon in 1957 when he notices a large cardboard box lying in the underbrush. Something compels him to look inside, and what he finds will haunt him for the rest of his life. It's the naked body of a small boy, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, his hair recently cut, his fingernails carefully trimmed, wrapped in a flannel blanket inside a bassinet box. He's been dead for weeks, maybe months, discarded like trash in the woods. Despite one of the most intensive investigations in Philadelphia police history, despite thousands of tips and decades of dedication from detectives who refused to let the case die, that little boy remained nameless for 65 years. He became known simply as the boy in the box or America's unknown child. His case represents the saddest kind of mystery, a child so lost that nobody even knew to look for him. In 2022, advanced DNA technology finally gave him a name, but the questions surrounding his death remain as troubling as ever. Who was he really? How did he end up in those woods? And why did it take so long for anyone to claim him? Welcome back to Crime Scout, True Stories. The boy in the box case has haunted Philadelphia and captivated true crime investigators for generations. Today we're examining the long journey to identify this forgotten child, the theories about how he died, and the ongoing quest for justice that continues even after his name was finally discovered. February 25, 1957, was a cold, overcast day in the Fox Chase neighborhood of northeast Philadelphia. A young man named Frank was checking his muskrat traps in a wooded area along Susquehanna Road when he spotted a cardboard box partially hidden in the underbrush about 15 feet from the road. The box was a JCPenney bassinet carton, and when Frank looked inside, he saw a child's body. He was so traumatized by the discovery that he didn't report it to police. He later claimed he'd had bad experiences with law enforcement and feared getting involved. It wasn't until several days later, on March 1st, when another passerby noticed the box and called police, that the investigation officially began. When detectives arrived, they found the body of a young boy, estimated to be between 4 and 6 years old, about 3 feet tall, weighing approximately 30 pounds. He was naked except for being wrapped in a cheap flannel blanket. His body showed signs of careful grooming. His hair had been recently cut, somewhat crudely, with patches cut closer to the scalp than others. His fingernails and toenails were neatly trimmed. He was well nourished, not a victim of chronic neglect or starvation. But his body bore the marks of abuse. There were old scars on his body, bruises in various stages of healing, and evidence of what appeared to be surgical scars on his ankle and groin. The medical examiner determined he died from multiple blows to the head, causing a subdural hematoma and brain swelling. His stomach contents revealed he'd eaten a meal of beans and vegetables several hours before death. The condition of his body suggested he'd been dead for several weeks or months, possibly since late 1956. He'd been well preserved by the cold winter temperatures. The bassinet box he was found in was traced to a JCPenney store, but thousands of such boxes had been sold, making it an investigative dead end. The Philadelphia Police Department launched an unprecedented effort to identify the boy. They distributed over 400,000 flyers throughout the Delaware Valley area, showing post-mortem photographs of the child. These were handed out on streets, displayed in store windows, and sent to schools, hospitals, and churches. It was one of the largest missing persons campaigns ever conducted at that time. The response was overwhelming, but none of the thousands of tips led to identification. Nobody claimed him. Nobody reported him missing. It was as if he'd never existed. The boy was buried in a donated plot at Ivy Hill Cemetery in Philadelphia on November 24, 1957. The small funeral was attended by a handful of people, mostly police officers and city officials who'd worked the case. A local funeral home donated the casket, a monument company donated a headstone, and a Presbyterian minister performed the service. The headstone read simply, "Heavenly Father, bless this unknown boy," with the date February 25, 1957. It was one of the saddest funerals in Philadelphia history. A child laid to rest with no family, no name, no one to mourn him. But the case didn't die. Detective Joseph McGillen and later Detective Augustus Glover became personally invested, working the case for decades even after retirement. Tips continued to come in over the years, some credible, many not. The case generated numerous theories about who the boy was and how he ended up in those woods. One of the most persistent theories involved a foster home. In 2002, a woman came forward claiming she'd been traveling with her abusive mother in 1957 when they purchased a boy from his birth parents who couldn't afford to keep him. The woman claimed her mother had severely abused the boy, keeping him in the basement of a house in the Fox Chase area. She said the boy had been killed after vomiting up his dinner of baked beans, and her mother had beaten him to death in a rage. The woman claimed to have helped dispose of the body. She directed police to a house in the area where she said the abuse occurred. Investigators found evidence that supported parts of her story. The house existed, the basement matched her description, and the timeline was plausible. However, they could never corroborate the most critical details, and the woman's credibility was questioned due to mental health issues. The lead couldn't be confirmed. Another theory suggested the boy might have been from a traveling carnival that had been in the area around the time. This would explain why nobody local recognized him. Carnival families were transient, often off the grid, and a child's disappearance might not have been officially reported. Some witnesses claimed to have seen a carnival near the area where the body was found, but again, nothing could be definitively proven. For decades, the case remained frozen in time, kept alive by dedicated cold case investigators, and the public's enduring fascination with this tragic mystery. The boy's grave became a pilgrimage site for people moved by his story. Toys, flowers, and stuffed animals regularly appeared at the headstone, left by strangers who wanted him to know someone cared. Then came the breakthrough. In 2019, the Philadelphia Police Department partnered with Identifiers International and the DNA Dope Project, organizations specializing in identifying unknown remains through genetic genealogy. They exhumed the boy's body and extracted DNA samples. Using the same technology that identified the Golden State Killer, forensic genealogists uploaded the DNA to public genealogy databases and began constructing family trees from distant genetic relatives. The process took years. Genealogists worked backward through birth records, death certificates, census data, and historical documents, slowly building a picture of the boy's family tree. In December 2022, 65 years after his body was discovered, the Philadelphia Police Department announced they had finally identified him. His name was Joseph Augustus Zarelli. He was 4 years old when he died. He'd been born on January 13, 1953, to Joseph Zarelli Sr. and Mary Elizabeth Zarelli. The identification brought both closure and new questions. Joseph's parents had both died years earlier, his father in 1959 and his mother in 1989. He had siblings who were still alive, but they had no memory of a brother named Joseph. Records showed that Joseph's mother had given birth to him, but what happened after that remained unclear. There was no death certificate, no missing person report, No record of what happened to baby Joseph after his birth. The prevailing theory is that he may have been given up, either formally or informally, to someone else, possibly a family member or acquaintance, and that whoever had custody of him was responsible for his death and disposal. The identification solved one mystery, but left the most important question unanswered. Who killed Joseph Augustus Zarelli? With his parents deceased, and no clear suspects identified, that question may never be answered. The case remains open, and Philadelphia police continue to investigate, hoping that someone who knew what happened will finally come forward. Joseph's headstone has been updated to include his real name. He's no longer the unknown boy. He's Joseph Augustus Zarelli, a child who deserved better, who deserved to be loved and protected, who deserved to grow up. His story reminds us that behind every cold case is a real person, a life that mattered, a loss that deserves justice. This has been Crime Scout, True Stories. Joseph Augustus Zarelli waited 65 years to get his name back. Now he waits for justice. If you know anything about what happened to Joseph, the Philadelphia Police Department is still listening. Subscribe for more cases where the truth takes decades to emerge, but never stops being worth pursuing.